Hi, I'm Julian McKenzie.
And I'm Tristan D'Amour.
Welcome to the Scrum Podcast, episode 87 of our show. Special thanks to everyone who's been able to subscribe to our new feed with the Sports Podcasting Network. This week's episode focuses on the Washington football team. You may have heard the old name that they once had is no more, and ownership is looking at replacing it with a new name. And I'm sure once that name is eventually unveiled, it will be a major story. There's that going on. And within that organization, there is the issue of its workplace culture. And the Washington Post, after some hype and fanfare leading up to it, dropped a report where more than a dozen women alleged sexual harassment and verbal abuse by team employees from the team. And we're going to cover it. And I'll say this much. Normally with our show, you're used to us you're used to us discussing a lot of Canadian sports news, but now we're really at the point where you want to touch up on not just Canadian stuff, but stuff that affects the North American landscape. If there's something in Europe that's big, we want to be able to cover anything that's just relevant. And the Washington football team name is the story that we are going to be looking at for today.
So today we are talking to Sam Fortier, or Fortier if you prefer. He's a writer at the Washington Post. I'm a big fan of his Twitter handle. You can find him at Sam4TR. Also a big fan of his Twitter bio if you go in and look at that. But we talk about he was implicated. He wrote parts of or was involved in some of the coverage that you might have read from the Washington Post surrounding the Washington football team as recently. And one of the reasons, and I think you touched on that a little bit too, Julian, is that this news also affects stuff in Canada. Because of the CFL team in Edmonton, there's a lot of teams that have controversial names in Canada. It's not only Edmonton, it's not only McGill University, which recently changed the name or took out the name that they currently had for their men's varsity programs. So we touch on that. We have a little debrief at the end where we talk about pressuring the sponsors and the sponsorship roles into those changes. It affected mightily the Washington football team. Any final preview words, J-Mac?
I just want to say with Sam, he was really great with us. Really enjoyed speaking with him. I'm happy to say that I went to the same school as Sam for a year. We both were at Syracuse University. And I had him on a podcast called The Face Off with myself and my good buddy Jake Lapin. And he was incredible on that episode where we were talking strictly pretty much about Syracuse basketball. And now we are talking to him about something completely different. And it's good to see that he's been doing well. I'm doing okay myself, but he's doing ridiculously well working with the Washington Post. So I'm happy that we were able to get to talk to him for this story. So without further ado, take it away, Sam Fortier. That rhymes.
Hey, this is Sam Fortier from the Washington Post. You can read all of our coverage about the Washington NFL team, including their name change and the recent report about a culture of sexual harassment and verbal abuse at WashingtonPost.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Sam4TR.
Sam, thank you so much for joining us here on the Scrum podcast. It's been a while. Obviously, we did have the time together at Syracuse University. Let's jump right into these questions here. We all knew the name change for Washington was going to happen at some point. And in all honesty, did you think it was going to happen this soon?
I think everyone kind of knew that it was coming. Some fans knew more than 4 decades ago when the protests started. Some fans knew in 2013-14 when we really started to see this debate erupt into the mainstream. I think a lot of people knew sometime after the killing of George Floyd, maybe as the monument started to fall, that really this name was eventually going to be changed. I didn't expect it coming as soon as it did. I didn't expect it to come the way it did with pressure from corporate sponsors. But I think that illustrates sort of where we're at with capitalism in America right now in terms of corporate sponsors being the ones to finally force this name change after so much public pressure.
Yeah, speaking of that, so there was an article on the Washington Post about how they're basically doing this name change and this rebrand in so little time. I think it's only a few weeks when it would usually take months. Is there any insight or leads as to what the name is going to be and when we're going to see actually it happening?
That is maybe the biggest question around this team right now. They certainly want to have this done before the beginning of the season, before players get here for training camp on July 28th. Obviously, that would be a very quick turnaround. They announced they were going to review the name on July 3rd. And like you said, this is supposed to take 18 to 24 months, and they're really trying to do it in about 3-ish weeks. So the speculation right now includes a few names: Red Wolves, Red Tails, Warriors. But it's really unclear what the leader in the clubhouse is, because Dan Snyder, the owner, has really kept this close to the vest. His inner circle right now is about 3 people, so it's tough to say.
It's clear that the team sponsors, FedEx, PepsiCo, Nike, we've understood how they've kind of tried to force this team's hand to change its name. What did you make of their actions in how they were trying to kind of make themselves heard in all of these discussions over the team name?
I think this shift sort of emblemizes where corporations are at in America right now, especially on shifting social issues. Like you saw, BlackRock Capital, one of the biggest investing firms in the world, kind of go advance causes for environmentalism and to stop climate change. I think you're seeing that now is corporations are realizing this is where consumers are shifting on social issues. And I think also there's some personal interest at play, right? Like FedEx CEO Fred Smith is one of the minority owners, one of the 3 minority owners trying to sell their share in the Washington football team right now. So, obviously he had some personal interest to put pressure on Dan Snyder, put pressure on the organization. And the stadium they play in is named after FedEx. So with understanding where consumers are at, he obviously wants to protect himself by saying, hey, you need to change the name, because if you're going to play your games at our stadium, the stadium named after us, we don't want to be implicated in any protests or social injustice advocacy. So this was definitely an effort of self-preservation, but they are advancing the cause that I think is very popular in America right now.
So this one is going to need a bit of context for our Canadian listeners. So you were talking about the name Red Tails. It was suggested by Lieutenant Colonel Harold Brown, who was one of the first African-American military pilots. He suggested that name as a nod, as an homage to the Tuskegee Airmen from World War II. So first off, what do you think of that name, and what does the DMV think of Red Tails?
Yeah, I think it's a decent name. I think it's a decent replacement. I think that it fits a lot of the things that the team wants, and I think that the fan base wants. You want to keep HTTR. You want to keep the 2 syllables for the fight song. You want to keep the color scheme. Red gives you burgundy and gold. And obviously, when you talk about rebrand, the Washington football team, despite not winning much for 20 years, still is one of the more valuable franchises in North American sports. It's worth about $3.4 billion, according to Forbes. There is a divide in the fan base on Red Tails. Some people like it, and I think that the team even likes it because it honors the military, which is a goal of theirs. I think there's a lot of military members in the fan base, especially living in the Washington, D.C. area. There are some detractors who don't like the name because they think it would allow them to be made fun of more easily. Red Tails is apparently the name of an adult men's magazine. So it might open some avenues for the team to be made fun of.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could open the door.
Yeah, now that you point that out.
Kind of dirty. Anyway, you know what? I'm not even going to go there. What name do you like? What name do you prefer? What do you think the team should go with?
My personal preference is Red Wolves. I think that's a really good reason for all the criteria I laid out before, and also, the red wolf is endangered species, native to the Southeast United States. It's I think the symbolism of it, and also it was a division, it was a Navy division that worked with the Navy SEALs, so you still get the military connection there. And frankly, just like the jersey edits I've seen on Twitter have been pretty dope. So I think all those things combined make that sort of my leader in the clubhouse.
So to get back on the old name, there have been studies and polls on how Native Americans or indigenous folk feel about the name. WAPO even had their infamous poll saying that 9 out of 10 Native Americans actually prefer the name before others came out and suggested otherwise. Have you spoken to anyone from indigenous communities about the name? And if you have, how had they felt about it?
Yeah, I have spoken to a few, and I think my conversations with them serve to reinforce the point that the Native American community is not a monolith. And though the dictionary defines the R word as a slur, some fans still remain, or some, in the Native American community remain fans of the team because it is, one of the few representations of Native American people in American popular culture. And I think, it's a complex issue for that community. And obviously, some people see it as racism in service to capitalism. It is, a memory of the way that, North Americans in general horribly treated indigenous people, when they came and colonized this continent. But some people see it as, some of Native Americans, see it as an honorific. They would point out that, a former Blackfoot chief, Walter Wetzel, was the guy who designed the logo. It's really important to remember that there are anecdotes and polls to support whatever side that you support, and it's a really thorny issue. And one thing I will say about our poll, the 9 and 10, that's been pretty widely used, is I think a lot of people take that to be a prefer, or they support the name, but the actual poll, the language was a little confusing, and in my opinion, and it actually is, are you offended by this? Which I don't think equals endorsement. So when people use that to say, hey, 9 and 10 Native Americans are for this, they support it, I think that's a common misconception, because it's really just, are you offended by this? And I think a lot of Native Americans, in the studies I've read, a book I read by C. Richard King, who's kind of a foremost expert on Native American mascoting, he pointed out that it's not, people, there are Native American high schools on reservations that use the R word as their mascot, and that's obviously well within their right. But that is, that's a disagreement in that community whether they should use that word. So it illustrates the complexity here, and it illustrates that there's not a commonly held belief, but also it's a really difficult thing. And I think that if you ask someone, here's the thing, let me put this like this. Mm-hmm. Even though a majority of Americans in 2014, I think it was like 60%, said they didn't consider the name offensive, 80% of them also responded that they would not use the name to address a Native American person. And to me, if you're not willing to say it to somebody's face, that means it's offensive and that it's wrong.
Thank you for adding that distinction. That's really well said on your part, Sam. I want to talk about the domino effect that could be happening, or at least maybe we're seeing potentially the early parts of it. We're looking at teams like the Atlanta Braves of Major League Baseball, who are looking at the tomahawk chop, which I know has been done in Kansas City. It's also been done for Florida State. We're Cleveland as well. Their baseball team, first they were trying to distance themselves from the Chief Wahoo logo, and now we're at a point where it looks as if they're going to switch their name. And there are other teams with Native American or indigenous imagery that are looking at their names. In Canada right now, the CFL team in Edmonton, there's rumors, not rumors, but there's reports going around that they might switch their name. Closer to home in Montreal, the University of McGill is looking to switch its name as well, and it seems as if they're down to a short list of teams as well. I'm just curious for what you make of the domino effect. Do you think there's going to be even more teams that are going to look at their names? Or I know it could be a hard question to ponder, but I'm just curious what you think about it.
Yeah, I do think this will prompt a continued reckoning with sort of how we present people, especially Native American people in this country. and in all of North America. I think a good example of this is Jacqueline Pata, who is a prominent indigenous writer, said that she wanted the Washington NFL team to change its name because she felt like the R word was the most offensive one. And so as long as that stood, it kind of enabled everyone below them. So, or less offensive than them, I guess, if you can see my air quotes. And if you reckon with that, then you reckon with everything else. And I think this is going to be a difficult thing, right? Because obviously the Cleveland Indians, the baseball team, has already said that they will review their name, even though people didn't really think Indians was offensive. But this really prompts a larger discussion about Native American imagery and how we portray it, because I think it's a very difficult thing, right? Because Central Michigan University, they're the Chippewas, and they had a debate a couple of years ago, I think, about, hey, do we want to change our name? And the Chippewas themselves, the Native American nation, they actually said, hey, please don't change that. This is how people know where we are. You guys represent us well. You represent us, correctly. And we want you to keep the name, because otherwise we sink into what some Native American mascotting experts call, the invisible minority, because Native Americans are about 1.5% of the U.S. population. And for a lot of people, because of the reservations, they don't know a ton of Native American people themselves. So that's one way to see it. But at the same time, like in Florida State, for example, the Seminole tribe of Florida says, hey, Florida State University, you do a great job. We condone your actions. There's a financial relationship there. You're helping the reservation. The Seminole tribe of Oklahoma thinks that that's essentially bribe money. They think that Florida State uses a white person to be chief of Scala, and he's the one that runs out in the middle of the field and plants the spear. So they say it's whitewashed, it's unethically done. So I think it's a really tricky relationship that you have with Native American representation for sports teams. And I think that now the Washington NFL team will not have its name anymore. We're going to go down the line, but I don't think that makes this discussion any easier.
Speaking of the aftermath and domino effect and whatnot, so with that name change and with everything going on with the franchise that we haven't talked about yet, what are Washingtonians, what are the people of the DMV feel about the franchise, and what do you think is going to happen in the first home game back?
Yeah, the reaction has been mixed. I would say many people are angry. They don't see it as offensive. The name, they see it as really exclusively linked to like the franchise's founding in 1932 and kind of all the way up to present, and them going to the game with their family and the memories and the rivalry with the Cowboys. That's what they see that word as meaning. And those people are really angry that they're taking away their history and heritage, which might echo another debate you know of in the United States. And then there's the people who say, there's the people who are relieved, right? Because when they go to the grocery store or when they wear their jersey to school, it's like, hey, I don't want to have an argument about, a racial reckoning in this country, or I don't want to grapple with the history, the very ugly history that colonizers had with native peoples when they came here. I just want to support my team, just like any other fan would. Like, I'm not making a political statement with sports fandom. Obviously, a lot of people are very reticent to connect sports and politics, even though I think we know that those things are inextricably linked in our culture. But really, I just think that there's a lot of anger, a lot of relief, some satisfaction. But as many people are blustery on social media and say, hey, you're changing the name, I'm done with this team, I'm not a season ticket holder anymore. Really, the first game back, which who knows when that will be, that we'll have fans in the stands, I'll be really interested to see what the reaction is. And I really do think it's going to boil down to the same thing that sports fandom always boils down to, that one fan, Jason Simmons, he's been a lifelong fan, had a really complicated relationship with the word after a colleague brought her Native American adopted daughter to his room, and she saw his Native American, or the R word logo spread everywhere. He sort of grappled with that, and he said, what does this mean? He kind of kept it in the house. And he, how do I phrase this? he had a hard time deciding whether he would like it. And this situation reminds him of FC Cincinnati, a soccer team he cheers for. When they came out with new jerseys, he was really upset. But once, the new jerseys wear off, once he had spent enough time looking at them, he started caring again what every fan cares about, which is winning.
I want to get into the recent report put out by the Washington Post over the 15 female employees who alleged sexual harassment and verbal abuse from other employees. How surprised were you to hear that this was going on? This is a team supposedly, according to its former president, Bruce Allen, that the culture was actually damn good. And you have that story. And then you have another story that came out a couple years earlier about how the cheerleaders were being treated. It was just kind of you have contradictory information versus what someone of the organization was saying. So I was just curious, how surprised were you to hear that all this new stuff was going on?
Bruce Allen saying the culture is damn good just kind of underscores how out of touch he was with this organization at the end. And as far as kind of the report surfacing 15 women, former employees, and accusing the organization of either ignoring and or fostering a workplace culture of sexual harassment and verbal abuse, obviously that is never acceptable. That's horrifying, and you are sort of struck by the gravity of what that means when you read the story and read the instances. At the same time, you're correct. It's not entirely surprising because of the cheerleader scandal where, a business executive was basically selling access to bikini shoots with sales packages or whatever. It's really disheartening. You're right. It's not entirely surprising, but it's disheartening that you can go through that as an organization 2 years ago and someone says, whoa, your treatment of women in the workplace, your concept of what this looks like is you need to fix this. And then 2 years later, this happens.
And what did you make of the social media attention to the story? Just in days leading up to the report being dropped in the evening, there were people tweeting, okay, there's some news that's coming out about the Washington team. It's not going to be good for Dan Snyder. It's not going to be good for the organization. And you had all these fans who were just kind of waiting with bated breath to figure out what this story was going to be. Did you get caught up in that?
I'm conflicted about that. And I'm going to explain it in two parts. The first part is, the buildup was pretty intense. Sunday night was the first tweet from NBC Sports Washington, and they kind of drummed up, hey, it's going to be a bad week. And then it sort of escalated from there. And obviously when fans see the reporters they trust, kind of hyping things up and saying something bad's going to happen, they're going to take that to the nth degree. So all of a sudden we're seeing, is Dan Snyder Jeffrey Epstein and running a child sex trafficking ring? Is someone distributing drugs or alcohol, or are people sleeping together at the facility? Obviously they took it to the nth degree. And I think when you build things up like that, and something comes out that the organization does not deal with women in an appropriate fashion, and you knew that before, the reaction I saw was, oh, that's it. And that really frustrated and disheartened me because, and the second part of this is, so when you get that reaction, right, you are therefore distracting. Even us talking about it is distracting from the ultimate findings, which were horrendous and really troubling as an organization, even anywhere in corporate America, treating women that way, or preventing someone from performing the job that they want to perform, or being in the sports industry, which you dreamt of your whole life, and that's the experience when you get there. I'm conflicted because yes, the behavior of some DC reporters was appalling, but and I think the reason it is appalling is because it distracts from the real issue here, which is this organization needs to treat women better, and we all should be focused on that. So that's sort of the reaction I had to other media members hyping this up.
So we saw the NFL, we saw Washington put out statements denouncing the organization's behavior. Now, when it comes to ownership being removed, we don't really have a lot of precedent with this in the very mainstream. There's the Donald Sterling thing with the Clippers, and then it's pretty much that's pretty much it. But is a story like this enough to have Dan Snyder removed from Washington?
There is no expectation that he would be forced to sell. I think the closest parallel we have to this is Jerry Richardson and the Carolina Panthers. That sexual harassment accusation came out a couple of years ago. And Jerry Richardson, obviously, he didn't even fight it. He didn't make them force him out. He just put up the team for sale and got out of Dodge. But the difference here is that he was directly implicated in the sexual harassment. He was making comments about women. He was, allegedly touching women. So for that example, in the same vein as that example, Dan Snyder was not implicated in or accused of sexual impropriety or of things of that nature because while he was seen as an enabler or a tone setter, because our reporting sort of paints him as a bully, making fun of his former president of business operations and saying you need to, because he was a former male cheerleader and saying, oh, do cartwheels at the end of a meeting to kind of humiliate him. You see the culture of verbal abuse being set at the top by the leader, by the owner, but you didn't see sort of the more heinous acts directly linked to him. So there is no expectation at this time that he would be forced to sell.
Sam, we really appreciate you taking the time to answer all of our questions and kind of give us everything you've been able to kind of uncover during your time covering this team. And obviously with the report that's come out from the Washington Post, we'll link to it in the description of our podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time. Hope all is well with you. And I hope you're safe out in Washington.
Thank you guys for having me. I really always good to hear from you, Julian and Tristan and Kevin. Thank you guys for doing what you do. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Sam Fortier from the Washington Post. It was really great to have him on. It was really great to have his perspective on what's been going on in Washington. And it's been really fascinating to look at this story, seeing how that's been unfolding and seeing the domino effect. We were talking about it with Sam and how it's affected other franchises as well. There's been a lot of news around the Edmonton football team. And we had an episode with Professor Norma Dunning a couple episodes back. Almost 2 years ago, I believe that interview happened with her. And it's probably one of the earlier episodes we did. It was really good. And it ends up being an episode that's pretty relevant now, considering the fact that reports are out there. It's very entirely possible that they might have made the announcement by the time you listen to this episode, but reports have been out there that Edmonton is looking to switch its team name.
So if you want to listen back to this episode, it is episode 25. We should do well to list out in case you want to figure that out and as a reminder that this is not a debate that has just started. It's yes, there is a domino effect from the Washington football team, but there is precedent. There were people that were advocating for that before. One point that I wanted to bring up, especially after the interview that we have, is the way that now the mainstream will understand this now, but it's been a thing for a while. It's the way to make a difference in a capitalistic society. And we are totally with Washington, with Edmonton. Teams will listen to you. Teams may listen to you as a fan, as a citizen, but they will definitely listen to their sponsors. Teams do not really care about their supporters when it comes to making money. They will care about the people that give them the money. FedEx, I now understand, I wasn't completely sure of it, had vested interest in the Washington football team. They
were the title sponsor of their stadium.
They play at FedEx Field. I understand that. I didn't know that they had vested interest in the team, as Sam was telling us. But it comes from people pressuring the sponsors. And if you're looking to voice your opinion about something, regardless, if your team name is fine and there's something that you want changed within your organizations, pressure the sponsors. Don't even look at the team. Don't even talk about the team. Don't even talk to the team. Go to the sponsors. And you know what? It's been quietly a thing for years, for decades, because we're in Montreal. where the Montreal Canadiens are reign supreme. And way back when the Molsons were owning the team, well, they still do now, but back in the first iteration, when the team didn't do well, people stopped buying Molson beer, and then the team would magically do well again. So here we are now in 2020, where capitalism still reigns supreme, where if you want your billionaire owner to move their ass and do something, go to the people that make that owner richer. Well, this is the overlining theme of this episode. There are teams that are problematic across North America and the world. I'm looking at Ghent right now. And if you want teams to change, if you want positive change, attack the sponsors.
Well, the thing about it is I think you're on the right track with that, but it's still all the more frustrating that because of how capitalism is set, because of how teams depend on sponsors and they're invested in that way with them, it's on fans or it's on the pressure that the sponsors feel to step in and all of a sudden say, all right, you know what, we're not going to rock with you guys if you guys have this. In a perfect world, you know, a team would just be socially conscious enough to realize that a team name that they have that might be derogatory is wrong, or the culture that they have in their workplace is wrong. And not to say that you mentioned that in any way, but you know, it's good that that teams are realizing what's up with them and are trying to change it. But with regards to names, this is still in like the R word in Washington. This is still a name that was paraded around for years and years. This is something that should have been gotten rid of a long time ago. And I'm of the opinion, similar to guys like Bomani Jones, who feel teams like Washington shouldn't necessarily get a pass for realizing now at when PepsiCo says they're trying to pull their funding or whatever, or try to pull their sponsorship, I should say, when FedEx is threatening to do it, when Nike decides, you know what, we're going to pull all of the team's gear from the website. Like, remember, like FedEx was the first one to say something, and then it was Nike and PepsiCo that came in. Considering Dan Snyder, and I'm not saying other owners would do this, there could be a scenario where just one sponsor comes in and says, all right, we're trying to pull out. And yes, they happen to be one with a minority owner in Fred Smith, but it's entirely possible that Dan Snyder buckles down and says, well, not buckles down, but Dan Snyder says, all right, well, we don't need you. We can get somebody else. There's somebody else who definitely will be able to put in that money. So to go out and be like, hey, you know what? Fans should go out there and attack and pressure sponsors. While it is all in good, I don't necessarily feel all that great about the fact that it has to get down to a point where money, I mean, I understand that's how it is, but it doesn't feel any better to know that at the end of the day, it's the pocketbook you have to hit, and it's not Julian. Just like conscience. And I get it. That's how things go. But that doesn't necessarily make me feel as a sports fan any better. Like, it got to this point where 3 sponsors had to say, yo, we're not doing this unless you change the name. 3 sponsors, not just one.
No, I think this is where, and to your point, J-Mac, this team has been named that way for a long time. The Cleveland baseball team has been named that way for a long time. The socially conscious thing is out the window at this point. I don't care. They're not doing it. If they were socially conscious, they would have changed it far away. And to be fair, to be quite honest, when it comes to especially Indigenous folk, they have much more things to care about, like having running water, having, just surviving where they are. Possibly for a lot of them, a team name of a sports team, they don't give a damn about. So for now, it's about, okay, well, as a population, we understand that this is a ridiculously unacceptable thing to represent a slur. And the way to do it, as sucky as it is, is to attack the money. The money is what rules. Wu-Tang said it 27 years ago. This is the games that we play. And right now, a lot of people are starting to understand that. Why do the richest people in the world can play those games and no one cares about that? Because quite frankly, we love sports. Sports are great. The problem is these people that own sports team, they've been playing these games forever. And now people are waking up to that. We know the rules to the game. We start playing said game, and then stuff starts changing. I'm seeing that as a positive because people are waking up to the idea of how to make change in the society that we live in. Is it the perfect society? Absolutely not.
No.
But people are learning the rules to the game, and they're playing it.
Yep.
And that's why we saw FedEx and PepsiCo. FedEx and PepsiCo, look, at this point it's speculation. Do I think that FedEx all of a sudden woke up one morning and thought that the name of the team they've been sponsoring for a while, like for fuck's sake, they're the stadium. They named the stadium the team plays in.
FedEx Field.
You can't tell me that all of a sudden they woke up and said, "Oh shit, the R word really sucks, doesn't it?" Come on. They've been pressured. But they've been pressured by people that understand the rules to the game in the capitalistic society that we live in now, or that we've always been living in.
But you know who's going to benefit from stuff like that? Those three sponsors I just mentioned. People are going to look at Nike in a favorable way and be like, wow, Nike really put themselves out there. Then they said, you know what? We're not going to sell this Washington gear. They're a cool brand. I feel a lot better supporting Nike. I feel a lot better buying a PepsiCo product. I feel a lot better about having to mail my stuff in America and having it go through FedEx. At the end of the day, while shout out to our producer, Kevin Laramie, I think he was trying to show off a PepsiCo product he may have. A Coca-Cola.
Oh, he's drinking Coke.
Drinking a Coca-Cola can. Of course, as an audio podcast, we have to be as descriptive as we can. But all this to say, like, you know, the game that's being played, and for all the fans that want to be more socially conscious with all that, like, you know, they may feel a victory, but for those teams those brands that are looking to pull up, Bel Air Direct in Canada, they're the ones who are applying pressure to Edmonton right now. They stand to win because for corporate brands right now, and we saw it when Black Lives Matter was at its height for this year, it is cool to look like you're woke and you're on the side on the right side of justice or history, because other people are going to flock around you and be like, hey, you guys are a cool brand. So like, and maybe I sound really cynical just bringing all that stuff up. I'm personally just feel happy that Washington is going to switch its name. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm happy that it's happening. And I'm happy that other people are realizing that if you attack the pocketbook, that's when you're going to see change. I just feel like when you know that's what it takes, it kind of takes not the fun out of it, but like it kind of sours it a little bit. It makes you think like, geez, it had to get to a point where like three different sponsors, you had to really kind of, you know, those three businesses had to be affected in a way, however they felt, to really make a change.
I think the mainstream is starting to know how the sausage gets made. But quite frankly, and you know, it's not new. It's been the case forever. Corporate sponsors and companies want you to buy their stuff. And if those companies give money to things that you don't feel good about, if you go to these companies and say, hey, the Washington football team literally uses a slur, do you really support that by giving them money? I'm not going to give you my money if you give them your money. And then they change because they want your money. Cash rules everything around me.
Yeah, but
pressure the sponsors.
A lot of people are coming to that awakening, and it's not just the sponsors too, because we got to remember a lot of those people were giving them products, giving them their money for those products, and they were willing to put that money towards a team like Washington as well. We're all going through this awakening where we realize, hey, you know what? we have to think about where this money's going. I'm not saying all the changes are going to be made right away, but like, it's better late than never, right? Like, at some, like, if everyone's getting in and playing the game, you know, an actual change is going to happen. At this point, I guess you have to take it, but the goal is to keep moving and keep having that change happen and not just let it die all because you just switch one team name. So
yeah, and hear me. I mean, like, maybe Killer Mike is like influencing my brain a little too much, but it's the whole like, okay, I'm not against sponsors. That is not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that we live in a society in which possibly the most important link up between the bigger teams and the bigger things in life is sponsors, and the fact that sponsors are giving people money is a big influence in change, in the fact that with sponsorship money teams can survive. And we see that in every league across the world. And if something is not right, one of the best, if not the best, engine of change is asking those sponsors if they are okay with sponsoring said thing. So, you know, there are good sponsors, but the thing is, it's not the sponsor in question that I'm judging. Yeah. It's this company, are you fine with sponsoring this?
Yeah, for sure. And for me, like, again, my whole point is like, you know, there are some people who are going to look at all the different work that these different sponsors have done, and they're going to look at them and be like, hey, you know, these guys are cool. I'm just saying, keep your third eye open and realize they stand to gain from their actions as well. You can be happy with the fact that a sponsor is going to do change, but also realize that they stand to gain as well. And also, as a podcast that you know, has had sponsors before and asks for sponsors, you know, I'm never going to be that guy that's going to be like, yeah, down with sponsorship. No, that would be incredibly hypocritical. Like, you know,
that's not what we're saying.
You're going to hear in a few minutes. You're going to hear in a few minutes, either from myself or Tristan. Hey, big sponsor guy, do you want to give us some money? You know, the big difference with us is that we don't have a racial slur in our title, and neither of us have that in any of our names either. I don't think Kevin is a slur, so I think we're good. Thank you for listening to the Scrum Podcast. If you want to send us questions, share your stories, or just say hi. Highs are nice. I'd like a hi. Shoot us an email at thescrumpodcast@gmail.com.
If email isn't your thing, you can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, at the Scrum Podcast on all three. And us individually, I'm at Tristan D'Amour with an S at the end on Twitter. And JMac is at JKA Mech, not Mac, even though whatever it's kind of his nickname. But anyway, at JKA Mackenzie.
This is what I'm worried about. Like, the fact that it is like MCK is my name, but people like to go in on Mac. That's very concerning to me.
If ever you have a mixtape drop, can you have MCK as my name? That's a dope title for a mixtape.
See, like, that would just mean I'd have to start actually making music, which there's no way I could do that. Also, I'm very glad that this conversation is happening right now, because I realized I had my old Scrum podcast outro doc up, and I was almost about to say stuff that we would have said back with our old podcast group that we were with, but we're not with them anymore. Shout out to the Upfront Network, though. If you're interested in sponsoring us, there's that sponsor word again. Sponsoring. Anyway.
Not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing.
No, not bad, I guess. If you're interested in that, or, buying ad space on the show, just shoot us an email at thescrumpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll give you a quote.
You can also support us for free by leaving a rating and a review on Stitcher, on Apple Podcast, and by sharing this episode with a friend.
Where did you get that echo from?
Shout out to producer Kevin Laramie.
Damn. Where can I get one? Can I have that? Oh, whoa. This is pretty cool. Oh, I think it stopped. Special thanks to Cooper Richardson for letting us use his music as our intro. The SoundCloud link is in the description.
You know, J-Mac, you can only get 2 words. I have for free. You had oh, whoa. Choose them wisely. This show is produced and edited by producer Kevin Laramie. Shout out to Kevin. As part of the Sports Podcasting Network, you can find out all about the network's shows. Kevin hosts Soccer Today every day of the week. sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Kevin, is there a day where you don't have podcasting in your life?
Is there a day with 8 days in a week?
I guess not.
So I guess not.
What a way to answer that question.
Well, there is such a thing as 1 week in the year where I take a vacation.
That's good to know. That's good to know, Kev.
What week is that? Christmas?
Okay, there's 2 weeks. I take vacation.
Jeez. What? Tristan, buddy, this was a good episode.
This was a great episode. It was a bit of a whirlwind. We had a power outage in this episode that, if you didn't notice, that means we're doing a good job. So we're gonna be back. We're gonna be back real soon with another episode. Julian, always a pleasure.
Likewise.
And as always, we'll hear you all next time.
We had a power outage.